I wanted to have you guys introduce yourselves, tell us what you do, who you work for, and what you do. I'll start with Brian here.
Thanks. Brian Bravo from MoPub. We're a Twitter company. We're a mobile in-app ad exchange that fuels the monetization efforts for publishers. We also work with a really great set of demand sources, DSPs, like Criteo and Verizon Media, that fuel the monetization efforts of these publishers.
So I'm Greg McDonald. I'm with Verizon Media. And just sort of being mindful that I'm not in the U.S., I'll just say that Verizon's the largest wireless carrier in the U.S., and Verizon Media runs some of the largest properties like Yahoo and Huffington Post. And then I'm responsible for the supply and data partnerships on our ad platform.
Hi, I'm Camille. Can you hear me well? Yeah? A little higher? Okay. So I handle business partnerships for Criteo. I used to also handle app supply for Criteo, so I joined to help have a better view of device IDs. If you're not familiar with Criteo, we are mainly doing retargeting and also upper funnel campaigns and a lot of retail media.
Perfect. Thank you guys for the introductions. Camille, I'd like to start with you for this first question. Obviously, quality can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So what does it mean for mobile in-app advertising specifically, and how can that definition differ based on who you're talking to, such as brand versus performance advertisers? I'd like to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, so first of all, we have two types of demand mainly. So we've got app install demand, but a lot of app display as well. That's handled mainly by cross-device. So we have a lot of mobile web and desktop advertisers that we bring to the in-app world. And that changes a lot the view of the app and the app publishers. So afterwards, in terms of what does it mean, for us it means that our advertisers are happy and they want to continue working with us. So we've got very little churn, and I think that's how we maintain it, is by quality.
So I think sort of similar answer. It's something that each advertiser has to really think about for themselves. In addition, as a platform, you also have to think about it. So, I mean, our definitions are going to be a little bit broader because we're serving a lot of advertisers, but we want to make sure that that the ads are served in, that the refresh rate, for example, is not too high, and that the user experience is valid, and that it's something that we think about in the context of both Android and iOS as well, because those user experiences can be different. So it's really, in a lot of ways, the quality is in the eye of the beholder, but you want to make sure, obviously, that it's a human and that the environment makes sense for the campaign you're running.
For brand advertisers, it's really understanding who our audience is. Who are these app users? What do they do online? What do they do in the real world? Quality of the app content itself, viewability, and the ability to actually target a list of curated apps. On the performance side, quality is also still very important. We want to be able to weed out a lot of the invalid or low quality inventory for our performance marketers, so they're not ingesting and bidding on that. MoPub does that for them. We also know that there's a monetary risk associated with these guys who are buying through us on CPM, but they might be looking to perform other metrics like CPI or CPA for their advertisers.
So a good follow-up question, Camille. I liked how you said that a definition of quality for you guys is keeping advertisers happy. So, what are some of the threats that might make them not happy? So basically, what are some of the concerns that advertisers have? I know all of you mentioned some of them specifically, but maybe dive into them a little bit more. And then specifically, what are some, how do you guys address those challenges and to keep them happy?
I would say the main one is brand safety. So where are my ads running, and how can I control that? So being as transparent as possible is one of the best ways to keep them happy. Afterwards, it's more inside the invalid traffic and being able to prove the performance. So we're mainly a performance represent, and being able to prove this performance is key to keep the advertisers happy. So tracking and getting as much granular data as possible is in a way the quality.
So I think about this a lot in terms of first principles. So sort of setting out policies, which we sort of talk about as a platform, but you can, as an advertiser, you think about it in terms of your brand guidelines, what makes sense for you. The human review is actually really important because there's often use cases you haven't thought about or that technology may not have solved for. You know, does it make sense that this white noise app that I'm supposed to sleep with has high viewability? Probably not. So sort of, you know, bumping your policies into real life. You obviously need technology to scale it because this business is all about scale. And, you know, the relationships with the supply partners is pretty critical too, whether it's platforms like MoPub or the publishers directly. You know, all of those things kind of play into how you get to where you want to be with your quality.
And on the supply side, for MoPub, it is mostly IVT, invalid traffic. We have a four-prong approach to this. It's vetting the publisher. We have a pre-bid solution in place with Pixalate to weed out, to filter out any of those invalid requests. We also have a post-bid solution with 2 MRC-accredited partners, Pixalate being one. And then finally, we have an investigation and enforcement team on the Twitter side that helps us to mitigate some of those things that come up.
Yeah, those are all good practices, and having those kind of policies in place can definitely go a long way. And all of you have mentioned, to some extent, invalid traffic or non-human traffic, and a big new initiative from the IAB Tech Lab. They had ads.txt come out a year and a half ago, and recently they have added app ads.txt. It's obviously, for those of you who don't know, it is meant to help reduce spoofing in the mobile app ecosystem, which has been an issue. So I'm curious to hear from each of you, because you all play a major role in the mobile app ecosystem. I'm wondering how you are approaching app ads.txt. There have been some companies recently who have said we're only going to work with apps that have app ads.txt. We've heard that from suppliers. I don't know if we've heard that from buyers yet, but that happened with ads.txt. So it's definitely an initiative that a lot of people are paying attention to. So Brian, I would like to start with you and MoPub, and you know, how are you addressing app ads.txt and maybe other similar industry initiatives?
Certainly important. In May of this year, we built the framework to allow the publishers to pass back that signal. It's really important to understand that MoPub, as a supply source, we have a direct relationship with 100% of the apps that we work with. So first and foremost, there is no reselling that's going on. We've started to see a trend where larger DSPs are starting to see that some of the traffic sources that they're getting are not validated through app ads.txt, and so they're starting to move away from that. In response to that, our publishers are now adopting and taking this more seriously, and while the majority of them already have that enabled, now the pressure is on them, and so down the road we see this as really being a mandate from the demand side. If you want to work with these large omni-channel DSPs, you're going to have that built out.
Yeah, I think it's something where Verizon Media is very supportive and has leaned in on this, but it definitely starts, as you said, Tyler, with the publishers sort of passing that signal, and I think as we see the critical mass there, it's something where there will be more tools. So I mean, the tools are essentially built at this point to be able to go and enforce it, and we just want to make sure that we're rolling those out at a point where it makes sense. But certainly very supportive, and I think it's really a key initiative to help keep the space well lit, and to help, frankly, to help with SPO efforts in a more automated way as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a great step, and we support it as we did for ads.txt. Now, it's also something that we started before, that we looked at. I mean, it was really important for us to know where our ads are running, and we have internal tools to be able to track it as much as possible, looking at the number of installs compared to the number of users, for example, that we're receiving, and we're tracking all that with our own tools. So we were already doing our best. We're really happy to see something at the industry level. So,
do you guys, you can just like nod your head or raise your hands, do you think we will see more companies come out with statements like we will only purchase app ads.txt enabled inventory, or do you think that that really just totally depends on the company?
Well, it depends on the rollout, so I guess we'll see. Once it's rolled out, then when it's at 99%, you'll have companies saying, yeah, I'll only buy that.
Yeah, we're already starting to see it with some of the larger omni-channel DSPs.
And Greg, I'd like to get your opinion on this first. How do you continuously monitor in-app activity, and how do you handle some apps that maybe have some red flags or some hurdles, such as aggressive content or an anonymous app? You don't really know who the publisher is. I know for each company what a red flag is can mean different things, but generally speaking, how do you monitor that, and how do you keep up with the evolving app ecosystem, and what can people buying mobile in-app, heavily investing in the area, what can they do to keep up?
So I think it's an area that we're all still learning on. So there are things, I talked about this earlier. We've got policies, and we do the human review, and we've got technology. But we're also ingesting signals from more places. There's been more news stories lately, and every time one of those comes out, we sort of look and go, okay, like, good thing we dodged a bullet there, but what else could this mean? What other ways is a fraudster trying to make their P&L? So it's really a case by case, and there's some international apps where we look at them in the US and go, oh, does this make sense? But then you talk to somebody locally and they'll say, yes, in fact, this is really important. The other thing that I think is that the space is so dynamic that keeping on top of what is hot right now, and then looking at those apps and trying to understand what, where they net out, and how do you think about them, and making sure that maybe they've innovated in some ad experience as well. How do we think about that, and do we need to update our policies or our practices or our tools to account for those things?
Yeah, so I think it's very similar for us. It's we try to avoid stopping the app straight away, or potentially just pausing it at a time for us to investigate, depending on the type of problem we're seeing, and really trying to reach out to the publisher, especially in certain markets where we're not aware of what's going on, and we're a global player. There's also some third-party stores that we don't know how to handle in Asia, especially in China, and this is something that we watch out for today. How can we control that, and how can we be aware of one local player in the market?
So again, as a supply source, we really all goes back to having that 100% direct relationship with the publisher. Before any app is brought onto our exchange, we thoroughly vet them through the media ratings terminal, partners like yourself. We also manually review the App Store reviews and comments and what their presence is on there. And the pre-bid filtering, the post-bid detection, and then also the investigations like we talked about. But it's really more of a preemptive effort to make sure none of that ever gets on our platform.
One thing you guys all mentioned, which I found interesting in various answers, was that there's still a pretty big human element in terms of manually vetting and going through those processes, in addition to working with software technology that can help with that. And one thing you have all mentioned as well, is I want to touch on it again, talking about monitoring apps. It sounds like focusing on international apps, maybe not focus. I'm curious, are there just a couple learnings from from the past year or so where the audience can take away when you do come across an international app? Like, what are some actual practical steps to take to, if you've never heard of it, but it might be a very legit app, what are some of the practical steps that you have taken to verify it for your own business?
So we might be a bit different there, as we apply the French GDPR worldwide. So that's already a big step in terms of privacy and consent management. So we're really privacy by design. So I would say that sometimes in local markets, they do not have the same view because they haven't been exposed to GDPR as well than we would have at a company level. Also, we have 32 offices across the world, so it's much easier to reach out to someone who works in that market and to get some feedback. But afterwards, we use a lot of tools, software, to help on the human piece. So obviously we have Pixalate with the MRT, but also App Annie, Mighty Signal, and we ingest all this data to really have a full view of the app before integrating it and after to monitor.
We have a lot of offices too, and I think it comes down to, a lot of the time it comes down to sort of reaching out to somebody we know and trying to figure out where that makes sense. Because the human review, I think, is in a lot of cases what gives us confidence in those edge cases is really talking it through and looking at the metrics and trying to see if they make sense, but then, you know, validating that against the real world.
Local presence. Our international offices are working directly with these publishers to vet them, as well as our team at Twitter, who's also on the supply quality side.
I mean, I think, you know, and all of that speaks to you, because if you don't have a local presence, then that's where, you know, having a partnership with whoever your supply partners are, whether it's at the publisher or the platform level, becomes really critical, because that's how you can sort of extend your reach and get that validation directly too.
So as part of that validation process, you know, you guys have laid out some steps that you can take to validate apps and vet them and make sure they're quality suppliers to work with. But you know, what are the actual signals that you're looking for? What is it that signals this is quality supply, or you know, this might not be quality supply? You know, what are some of those signals when you're having these conversations with apps that you already know about or apps that you don't know about yet? What are you looking for? And Brian, I'd be interested to hear from you first.
So yeah, first and foremost, it's establishing that relationship with the publisher directly. Also, looking on the App Store again to read through the comments and get a feel. If downloading the app, of course, looking at what type of content is on there. How do the ads actually render? Are they all in the background in your noise machine app, or are they actually in view? And also, of course, our partnership with you and the MRC fraud detection out there gives us a real confidence that the work we're doing at Twitter, as well as with our partnerships, are creating the most quality, well-lit environment for brands and performance marketers.
I guess the ad experience is what I was going to say. Sort of the ad and the user experience is really key, and then
so like downloading the app and testing it
on Android and on iOS, you know, and any other environments that make sense again. And then, you know, the other thing too is that people do a lot of things with their smartphones, so there's a lot of innovation in this space. I think we all know that. So as you go and there's a new kind of app or a new trend of something that comes out, then really taking a look at those specific use cases, like those, you know, that's where there's a lot of innovation, but there may be things that create a false positive that's actually a cool new ad experience.
I would say to add on to everything that was said previously is before integration, so either through the SSP or direct, there's really brand safety. So does it follow our brand safety policy and no copyright infringement, all the topics there. And afterwards, it would really be on the invalid traffic and do we see the performance. So we've got a lot of retailers that advertise with us. Obviously, it's easier to track because are people buying? If after the click there's no products that are sold, it's that we have an issue. So it can be an issue with how the pipes are connected between the SSP and us, or between the SSP and the publisher, and that's what we really watch out for, because it can happen often. And also, some publishers we receive through 10 different channels, and we don't get the same performance everywhere, so that's where you afterwards limit the number of SSPs that you work with to get the best quality. So I would say that really the true non-human traffic comes as a very small percentage compared to invalid traffic that we would see overall that we solve every day.
A good question to ask that kind of touches on a lot of things. You know, we've talked about app ads.txt and what you look for in a partner and how you vet the partner. What does quality mean? From your experiences, we've We've established that you guys are big companies with international offices. So again, people look to companies like yours to kind of set the pace and set the standard for improving quality in any environment, especially mobile app. So one thing that I think we would love to hear from you are just what are some of the best practices that you've applied, that you've seen other companies apply, that have made a material positive impact on quality in mobile app. Greg, can you start with that question?
It's thinking about what makes sense for you and then being really methodical about approaching that and delivering against it. It's really easy to say we're just going to delegate this to a tool, we're just going to, you always have to have trusted partners, that's absolutely the case, but really thinking about what makes sense for where you sit in the value chain and whether you're a platform or a buyer, and does a blacklist or a whitelist make sense for you? There's good use cases for both, but it's not going to be the same answer for everybody, for example. So really taking that approach, and again, like doing a sample and taking a look at the apps, like what's going on there, because I agree there's not a lot of like true non-human traffic, but there's no shortage of publishers that are stuffing the app with ads, and that's not good either.
From the supply side, obviously quality extremely important to MoPub. We like to do everything we can in advance of ever getting to running into any issues. So again, it's about having that direct relationship with the publisher, sounding like I'm repeating myself quite a bit too. Thoroughly vetting them through our internal processes and then working with folks like Pixalate to ensure that we never get to a place where we're running into any reactive issues.
And to add, I would say really opening up the conversation to the players you're working with and not just blocking the traffic when you see an issue, because if it's real spoofing, the publisher is just going to go somewhere else, or whoever the fraudster is going to go somewhere else, and we're not really stopping it from making its P&L. So what we want is really to cut the funds. So we're trying to work as much as possible to open up the conversation between the players, especially on app install, that we find to be much more challenging. We're much more used to the display, and an app install is something we really do only with the app environment, and that's something where it's tough to follow. It changes very quickly, and we can only learn through together.
I want to echo that. That's a great point, and just being collaborative. It takes a village to eliminate the fraud, and so where you see it or where you even have questions, it's worth raising that with your partners and then having the conversation and trying to run it down and figure out, was it a problem? Was it just a problem with the plumbing? How do you get there? Like taking the time to figure that out, because that's what really makes the whole ecosystem cleaner.
Yeah, and we have seen, we talked about app-ads.txt. We've seen that's kind of an industry-level collaboration. Programs like that have come from the desktop space to the mobile app space, which is really great to see. We do have some time, a little bit of time for audience questions. I do know our panelists will stick around a little bit after the panel if you want to kind of ask them a one-on-one question. But do we have any questions from the audience? Does anybody have a question for somebody up here? Do you guys have any questions for each other, or do you want to poll the audience with something? Oh, you're right. Can we see in the audience, just raise your hand, who is on the supply side in the audience? All right, and then what about the demand side? Okay, so a couple people on demand side. So mostly suppliers here. So some great advice for the audience here. Again, the panelists will be around for a little bit after. Pixalate, we have a lot of content focused on mobile in-app. We've got some ad fraud reports, invalid traffic reports, and we're also working on an app ads.txt report so people can get an update on adoption in that area of the industry. So stick around for a little bit afterwards. Thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you to our panelists for joining. This was really great. And we will be around for a little bit, and you can also get some ice cream. We've got some homemade ice cream over there. Thank you, everybody.